Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. You like that film? I had nothing to do with it. As Evan said, I recently became an IAC member probably about 2 weeks ago, and I obviously must have done something terribly wrong because they asked me immediately to give the keynote. I'm not sure what I did, but anyway, I'm delighted to be here and shed some experiences that Evan referred to as to how I see the market in which APCO worldwide is working, and both the opportunities ahead as well as the challenges. And it's from this perspective of being in the private sector, being a trade negotiator, working on Capitol Hill, private equity investor at PwC, and a number of other different vantage points where, and this is part of my theme, I think, in this talk, is I really have reinvented myself. And I got to tell you, in 1981, after I got my PhD in economics, I never imagined that I would have reinvented myself so many different times. I have absolutely no regrets, and it's given me, I think, a very interesting perspective on companies and how the world has changed. I want to focus on 3 points today in terms of the opportunities and the challenges that APCO worldwide will likely face and in some sense is facing today. I want to talk a little bit about the geography and how the pressures from the worldwide economy and politics will be affecting the firm, as we all know it already is, but it's likely, those pressures are likely to accelerate, but those are both good pressures and bad pressures. I want to talk about how we should be operating in this changing dynamics between focusing on process and thinking about clients in terms of what their business is. And then thirdly, I want to talk about my own experience in different firms, about how success is ultimately driven by the agility of the employees and the way that the organizational structures and incentive structures are set up in the firms, and that this agility that needs to take place internally comes from the fact that the clients that we're trying to help also need to become more agile. There is a trend underway, and I witnessed this when I was at PwC, of a convergence. Management consulting firms, the strategy guys, are trying to become more operational like the PwCs. They're also trying to get into the crisis management business. PwC was in this big time. The important point is that when we work with a particular client, what's our business model? Most of the management consulting firms think in terms of, if they have a client, they think in terms of the ecosystem in which that client is sitting. So let's say you might be working on a crisis management project for someone who's making coffee machines or home appliances, which I overheard at breakfast. What you've got to do is not only understand what your particular client's worry is, but how what he or she does fits in with the entire business in which he or she works. And you've got, the old saying as a consultant or as a public affairs consultant or strategy consultant is put yourself in the client's shoes. The point is you have to do that, but not just the client's shoes, not just the person who's actually paying your bills, but the overall ecosystem in which he or she is working. Your job ultimately, I think, is to make that client look good to the people to whom he or she reports. And that means you've got to understand where he or she sits. And it's not just a task that you're doing in the immediate point that matters, but how does that fit in? He or she may not fully understand exactly, the full ecosystem. The difference is that the PwCs of the world, unlike the McKinseys or the BCGs, are focused on process a lot. They've begun to migrate, particularly when they hired me and my team, to focus on strategy and operations, but their bread and butter is putting out fires or trying to prevent risks from being exposed. But that only gets you so far, because not only is avoiding risk not a growth story, but they make their money by putting in Oracle software, or this is how you're going to run your risk mitigation scheme within this branch of the business. So it's very process-oriented, and they get paid based upon the selling and the implementation of a certain process, a business process, without necessarily focusing on the actual business of which that process is a part. But the trick of being successful in an organization is for that organization to allow for porosity among the different parts of the organization and to become an agile organization. And what that means from a day-to-day perspective is to put in place an incentive structure that makes people want to go beyond their formal boundaries. Try a different market, different product or service market. Try a different geography. Try to reinvent yourself. And I think the organization is flexible enough from the little bit that I know of it that can be done, but it needs to be, those incentives have got to be strengthened. And the more curious you are and the more you dibble and dabble in different parts of the business, the better advisor you're going to be to the clients you serve.